Welcome back, adventurers, once again to Let's Play Chaos Head. In the last episode, we saw Senna scoping out some information, or at least trying to scope out some information, but instead, much to her annoyance, all she got was how much of a trend the new gen murders had become over well, over the past several months. We also got a glimpse of Rimi Sakihata, but was that a dream or a delusion or something completely different? Who can say? But she was definitely conversing with an unknown person, somebody who Rimi seemed to know all too well, and thus someone who apparently knew Rimi all too well, judging from their conversation. But well, now we're back with Takumi, and he is only just started to realize how we've been missing a single day off his minimum attendance shift chart is going to have on his life from this point forward. I didn't want to go, but it would be bad if I didn't. If I stayed home any more than this, I wouldn't be able to graduate. Even after everything that's happened, Takumi is still focused on that one point. Not that failing to graduate would change anything about me. Okay, so maybe I was wrong on that front. Never mind then. I dreamt of Rimi. It was an odd dream. Wait, that was your dream? It seemed terribly nostalgic. It seemed terribly lonely. It seemed terribly sad. And it seemed terribly distant. Was that a dream of the past? Or was it something else? That we cannot answer right about now. Would Rimi come to school today? I'd constantly kept thinking about what happened the day before yesterday. I thought about it on and on, to the point of neglecting Ensu, which is probably a first for somebody who wields the mighty Nightheart. Not about Shogun having appeared, or the hallucination of everyone disappearing from Shibuya. I didn't attach tremendous significance to those things, even though you probably should, because they were very significant. They must have been my delusions. One was, the other wasn't. I certainly couldn't believe Shogun was an old man like that. And thinking back over it, there were simply too many impossibilities involved in people vanishing from Shibuya. It had been a particularly real feeling delusion, but I was ashamed of myself for being so quick to believe in a situation so far removed from reality. Yet, that is exactly what happened. More than any of that, Rimi, the girl I had called a demon until very recently. It's only now that he's actually starting to trust her, and if that was in fact a dream of Takumi's, I hesitate to say Rimi's because that would imply that they actually share dreams, although given everything that's been going on recently, two people sharing the same dreams is probably that not much of a stretch, but I'm rambling at this point. Seems like Takumi is starting to trust Rimi, but it could also be that they actually do know each other from the past, which is a very interesting thought. My memories of being in that place was surreal and malleable, as in a dream. Sorry about that. Didn't want to sneeze in the microphone yet again. And the one thing that I still recalled clearly was the feeling of Rimi embracing me, and of her concern, which you now understand is genuine. If she hadn't done that for me, I might have become deranged and lost sight of myself. Why had Rimi saved me? Either from yourself or being run over on the Shibuya pedestrian crossing once the hallucination was over. I wondered if it was because, as she said, we were friends. I had not a single memory of things like being with her in my class since freshman year, or of us going to a movie with Mizumi-kun. Yet that dream would definitely belie a connection. But the attitude with which she made contact with me was clearly one of a close friend. Rimi had been a little close to crying when she'd held me. At the very least, I didn't think it was an act. That is because Takumi Nishijo, Rimi's behavior wasn't an act. She was the first girl to ever worry about and cry over a gross otaku like me. When she acted like that towards me, it instantly blew away all my previous dread and suspicion. We still have the issue of the events of the third murder, but I think we can probably put that on the back burner, for at least for the time being. More than that, it made me feel like I was on the verge of falling for her. No, but as you might expect, I was keeping myself carefully reined in. Or so you say. Confusion took up most of the space in my heart. How should I act around Rimi from now on? That is a very good question. I don't think I can provide the answer. Was Rimi my ally or my enemy? Was Rimi the new gen criminal? It was the fact that she had saved me. But it was also the fact that I had seen her standing still, drenched in blood at the scene of the staking. So which is which? I stopped by Shoto Park on the way to school. Haven't been here since our last encounter with Yua Kusunoki. After what had happened with Yua, I'd given up on my custom of eating breakfast here before heading to school. We haven't met her since then, so I guess old habits truly do die hard. It didn't feel so pleasant when I thought that Yua might be watching me from somewhere. And if she came over to talk to me, she'd regurgitate her annoying, crazy conspiracy theories at me again. That's if we ever meet her again. I couldn't afford to spend any time around her. Yua is Rimi's subordinate. I think we can cross that pet theory off the list there. Maybe I've been wrong in believing that deduction of mine for so long. I think the words you think come to mind. But that didn't mean Yua wasn't my enemy. There remained the possibility that Shogun was the last boss and that Yua worked under him. There's also the theory that you had that Shogun too was one of Rimi's subordinates as well. Another theory that is definitely quashed at this point. In any case, it would be better to stay away from her. Except today, I had somehow ended up coming here. I carefully studied my surroundings to verify that Yua wasn't there, then slowly lowered myself onto my usual bench. Luckily, no bag with a trio of multicolored Gero froggies attached to it either. I doubt that Yua would be so careless as to leave her bag conspicuously out in the open in the middle of a public area. I cast my eyes toward the pond while stuffing my cheeks with the chocolate pastry I bought at a convenience store earlier. There was little wind, and the surface of the water remained idyllic. Once in a while I saw koi-like fish slide through the cloudy water. That's neat. Today, rarely enough, there was no other people in the park, or were no other people in the park. Forgive my grammar there, ladies and gentlemen. I can't read. even though I know how to read. Um, but I digress. It was a very quiet space. As my gaze swam about the park, what I thought of was predictably enough Rimi. To be honest, going to school was a bother, knowing I would have no choice but to see her. And so here I was, here in the park, buying myself time. I felt like I said all kinds of harsh things to her. That's because you did. You actually leveled your accusations right to her face. Despite that, Rimi had kept smiling and treating me kindly. Now, she did knock some sense into you before that, and if I went to school now, she would surely start talking to me again the same as before, as if nothing had ever happened. Smiling, acting as though what had happened in front of the 107 building didn't bother her in the slightest, calling out to me as my friend. Of course, there's also Daisuke to consider as well, or to take into account. Somehow that eternally cheerful demeanor of hers depressed me a little, but she also had an atmosphere that made me think maybe if I stayed with her, I might start feeling brighter as well. Probably the first time that you've ever had such thoughts there, Takumi. With what kind of expression should I go meet her? I definitely didn't think Rimi was a demon anymore, but it was also true that I didn't think of her as a friend. Mizumi-kun said that Rimi and I had gotten along well as classmates for the past year and a half, but I had no memory of anything of the sort. Perhaps something was going wrong with the person behind me after all. Perhaps indeed. But was it possible for my memories of Rimi to disappear like that, as if they'd been pinpointed? I honestly couldn't tell you. I hunched over even further upon entering the school building, walking through the lockers at the entrance. Following my usual principle of getting by at school, I walked slowly along the edge of the hallway as I headed for the stairs. My class was on the third floor. It was quite a pain in the neck to climb up there. If only there was an escalator, I thought. It would be a very fancy school if you had escalators. Having come to the foot of the stairs, I spotted a girl ahead of me, swaying as she climbed up. She dragged her right foot a little as she walked. Maybe she twisted it. Her small body wavered from side to side. She seemed awfully precarious. As the other students steadily caught up with her and passed her on both sides, she climbed slowly, literally one step at a time. Looking at her from below, it seemed like her panties would start showing now at any moment now. That's your first thought that really comes to mind? At this rate, I'd end up a peeping Tom. I didn't want people to start calling me Mirror Man. When that occurred to me and I stepped towards the stairs to go past her, right then. Oh dear. The girl caught her toes on the edge of the stairs and suddenly wobbled. And she came tumbling down with such momentum that it seemed like I'd hear a bang-type sound effect. If this were an anime or a comic, probably, but this isn't either of those things. Luckily, since she'd stopped on the landing, she hadn't fallen all the way down the stairs. But she remained on her knees as though she were in pain and didn't move for some time. Hopefully she hasn't fractured anything. That would be bad. Was this a flag emergence event? No, of course it wasn't. Even if it were, I wouldn't be able to bring myself to speak to her. which is why I hastily stepped past her. Now, of course, here is the point where I finally mention the fact that she is the transfer student Kozue Orihara, and the reason that I didn't mention it up until this point is because I thought that Takumi would, and he completely forgot who she was. Then again, he's only met her once in the that when she was first introduced to the school. Sorry, but get help from a third dimension loving womanizer like Mizumi-kun, okay? Please don't seek anything from me.
Oh.
But she stayed curled up so motionlessly, I started to get a tad concerned. After getting halfway up the stairs, I quickly turned around to see how she was doing. Definitely callous words from you earlier there. She was clutching the railing and trying her hardest to stand up. Her knees were knocking, like those of a newborn deer. Blood oozed from her knee. I wonder if she'd scraped it. I don't think you'd have to wonder about that when it's so plainly obvious.
Huh.
That face. I'd seen it before. Wasn't she the girl who had transferred to my class last week? So you finally get it at last. Her name was... what was it again? I couldn't remember. Never mind. On top of that, she was crying. Did it hurt that badly? She'd fallen pretty flashily, but it hadn't looked like a big enough impact to merit crying. You just said she scraped her foot on the stairs or the landing. No one attempted to offer her a hand. Having barely managed to stand up, she hunched forward to peek at her knee. Apparently she was checking the condition of her injury. Yeah, I imagine hurting yourself like that would definitely make anyone upset. The transfer student wiped her eyes, set her bag down, and began rummaging around inside it. What could she be searching for, I thought to myself. Probably a band-aid to fix over her injury? All of a sudden, she pulled her hand triumphantly out of her bag and hoisted it above her head. Definitely her demeanor has done a complete 180 from what it was just a moment ago. Her fingers were clutching a band-aid. Yeah, I called it. And it seems like she's finally noticed Takumi standing and staring at the top of the stairs. Our eyes met. The transfer student's cheeks went red, and she hung her head. Well, for the time being, she seemed to be alright. And even if I didn't stay and watch her, she'd be okay. Reaching that conclusion, I hastily made for the classroom. In we go. I lowered my head, as I always did, fixing my gaze on the end of my toes. And that is going to be it for this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Adventurers, and when we return, we shall wait and see whether or not Daisuke and Rimi are going to be attending today's class lessons. As always, until next we meet.